have my Vietnamese coffee that I've been drinking pretty much all day. And if you've had Vietnamese coffee before, you know this thing will keep you up for like days at a time. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming something that a lot of you guys have been requesting, and I'm finally having the time to sit down and record everything. Today I'm going to do a Q&A video, a few questions that some of you guys have sent over to me through YouTube or Instagram. And a lot of these questions are really great for students going into the RT program, and then also for some RTs that are looking into going into traveling. I tried to like collect as many questions as I could, and some of them kind of overlapped. So I hope I answer most of the questions that were sent to me. And I think this is going to be really helpful because it's August, so I think a lot of you guys are either already starting the RT program or in RT school. I really hope this helps you guys during the RT program. And with this new big wave of COVID, if you guys are planning to leave that job and become a travel RT, hopefully this helps you guys too. So why don't we just get started? All right, first question was how to pick an RT program. I went to an accelerated RT program. So typically respiratory school is about 2 years, maybe even more than that. And the thing that really drew me into this specific program was that I was gonna graduate in 17 months. And honestly, when I decided that I did want to go back to school, I looked at all the programs that were offered in my area. And to be honest, there really weren't a ton of respiratory programs here in the Dallas area, and the program that I decided to take on was an accelerated program, 17 months. So for me, the big factor was to graduate as fast as I could. I really didn't want to spend any more time in school than I had to. So that was how I picked this particular program. So I mean, I just recommend looking at the different programs that they have in your area. The accelerated programs are definitely much more expensive than your typical 2-year program that they usually offer at like the community colleges or maybe even at the universities. And after I decided I wanted to take this particular program, I made sure to check all the prerequisites because like I said, it is a lot pricier when you do these accelerated programs. If you can do all the prerequisites, and by that I mean like your basic like government, math classes, science classes, if you can do that outside of that school and just go to a community college, you're gonna pay like a fourth of the price. And I had pretty much all the prerequisites done for the associate's degree for respiratory that I was able to go ahead and dive right into the actual respiratory program. So when I started in this program, I was just taking respiratory classes. Like, it wasn't like your basic gen ed classes, it was like classes specific to your respiratory program. So I definitely recommend that you do look at the prerequisites needed for your associate's degree and try to get that done outside of the program because it'll save you a lot of money. So I can only speak on my experience during RT school, and because it was an accelerated program, the number one thing I tell people is that those accelerated programs for respiratory school are definitely not for everybody. Because the program is so quick, you have to learn so many things at a fast pace. And I think that if you're not the type of student that can study independently, that can understand concepts very quickly, and then know that the next day you go to class, you're gonna learn something completely different, I don't think that kind of program is for you. And I guess that goes with how I really studied during my RT program. A lot of it was me going to class, taking notes, listening to lecture, and then right after class, I would pretty much spend the rest of the day studying. Basically, for the 17 months that I was in the RT program, I would go to class, and after that, I would study for the rest of the day. So a lot of you asked if I worked during my RT program, and I actually did have a full-time job the first, I would say 3 months that I started. And then after that, it just was just too much. And then I also had clinicals starting, so I had to give my notice at my full-time job, and I did not work for the rest of the, I would say 14 months that I was in the RT program. So it was a huge sacrifice. And when I say that, it was like, I wasn't working, I did nothing socially, I was always studying. As far as studying goes, the way I study is right after school, I would go somewhere, rewrite all my notes. And when I say rewrite, I would make sure I broke it down to where I would understand it, like in wordings that I understood, and also I wouldn't move forward to the next topic until I knew that I understood clearly what we were talking about. Because like I said, it was like one day we were going to be studying normal ABG values. The next day we were moving on to mechanical ventilation. So if you didn't understand something on Monday, you definitely weren't going to get it on Tuesday, because it's all connected, you know what I mean? So I always made sure I studied after class and got that concept right away. And I would rewrite my notes, I would Google things, I would YouTube things. I mean, you're so lucky to be in school during a time where there's so many resources available to you. I mean, there's a ton of stuff on the internet right now. And even back then, I was in RT school in like 2018. There weren't a lot of respiratory YouTubers and a lot of information about RT school on the internet, but I've noticed now looking on YouTube that there are a lot more channels that talk about breaking down like ABGs, mechanical ventilation. If you search for something on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find it, but even on just Googling stuff, I would use Quizlet, I would use other schools' tests that you could find online, like anything I could do to like work out the concepts in my head, that's what I would do. So yeah. And when I say I studied every day, I literally studied every day, 7 days a week. I didn't have a job, so I was so lucky to be able to move back in with my parents, and I had the luxury of not working. And I know for so many people, they don't have that luxury, and I felt so blessed to be able to do that and just focus all my energy and just everything into finishing the RT program. And I was so lucky that I had friends and family that understood that. So, I mean, if you're planning to do the RT program, just know it's like, it's a, what, 15 months, 17 month, 2-year program. Like, you're gonna have to sacrifice. I wasn't going out, I wasn't dating, I was single at the time. So like I said, everything was revolving around me finishing the RT program so I could just start working right away. And to be very honest, you just have to stay motivated. For me, a huge motivation, which I'm actually living now, was to become a travel RT. Like, I had so many friends that were nurses and a few that became travel nurses, and I loved hearing about them just living in different states, working, and I just really, really wanted that to happen in my life. And I remember being in school thinking like, I just need to get through respiratory school and then maybe work a year or so I can finally start traveling. And honestly, it ended up just like that. So when you're in the thick of it, I know it sucks being in school, but it'll be over before you know it. And hopefully you'll be traveling soon, or just have that motivation and that goal to keep you motivated throughout the program, because you're definitely going to have to sacrifice a lot of time to study and just get through the program. And for me, I studied so much because I didn't just think of trying to get through that specific class or that specific semester. I was basically preparing myself to take my boards, and that was of course the end game of respiratory school, right? Was to pass your boards. So you know, if you weren't getting it as you are going along, it's just gonna make things harder for you towards the end of it and when you're studying for your boards. So that was something I always kept in mind, was your whole respiratory school is you just preparing for boards. So don't try to just get through the program and think, oh, I'll just study for the boards at the end of it. I mean, for me, once it was time for boards, I was pretty ready to take it. I felt pretty confident in being able to pass. And as far as preparing for your board exam, so you know there are 2 tests that you have to take whenever you do graduate from the respiratory program. One is a multiple choice, which once you pass, I don't even remember the numbers or the percentage you have to get, but the first exam you take, it's a multiple choice test and you get your CRT certification, and you need that to take the next test, which will give you your RRT certification. And the second test is going to be your clinical simulations. So for me, like I said, I basically thought of the whole RT program as preparing for my boards. So once I was done with the program, I gave myself 1 week to study for boards. So right when I was finished with the program, I carved out 1 week to study nonstop for 7 days. And for me, the thing that helped me the most, I hated the Egan's book. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys use that because that's like the only RT book. So yeah, I never read Egan's even throughout RT school. The number one thing that helped me was, luckily our program paid for those study classes right before boards, and we were given the option to do Kettering, and we also did the Pursing review. I didn't make it to the Kettering review, but I did make it to the Pursing review, and man, that is what really made me feel 100% confident for my boards. I don't even know if there's a more recent edition of that, but that book helped me and just came in clutch for my multiple choice, my CRT exam. It really broke down every aspect of the test, and all these programs, they give you tips and tricks on how to study for your board exams. So if your program does not offer you that option, I would highly recommend that you pay out of pocket for this, because your board exams, you have to pay for that. And for our program, it was included in our tuition to take each exam once. After that, you had to pay out of pocket for it. So I wasn't about to pay an extra so-and-so dollars. I was like, I'm gonna pass it this first time and be done with it. So if you can spend that extra money to take those study classes, I would highly recommend that. I did hear good things about the Kettering review. I had one classmate, she was so sweet, she actually gave me the notes from that review. So I was able to look over that and do the study questions with that. And then another thing that helped me too was the Lindsay Jones study materials. I really hope that these are still like relevant now. It's only been like 3 years since I graduated, but I'm sure once you start the RT program, they'll give you more options and more information about stuff like that, but highly recommend doing something like that before you take the board exams. So like I said, I did 1 week after I was done with school to study for my multiple choice. I passed that, and then after that, I gave myself 1 week. I gave myself 1 day to rest, and then 7 days after that to study for my clinical simulation, which of course that is way harder than the multiple choice. And with ClinSims, what I did to prepare myself for the board exam was just study questions. I did clinical simulations. Our school offered this program called RT Board Review. If you can find that, definitely try to do that. It's just this website that has a bank of like so many clinical simulations, and you can practice doing the questions on there. And as far as ClinSims are, it's really just practice. Understand, because by that time you should understand the concepts. It's just really putting that into motion. Another tip I would say is just try to take your boards as soon as you can, once it's all that information is still fresh in your mind. I was really strict on myself about taking only that 1 day break after my multiple choice test to do my ClinSims, because I mean, you're already in the thick of it. I'm in that study mode, and it made it just like 10 times easier for me to just be done with it. So yeah, that was how I studied for boards, and I basically got my certifications like 2 weeks after I was done with the program. I was already working even before we graduated, so. So clinical rotation. This is another key thing during your program. I cannot emphasize how important your clinicals are during your program. So for me, I felt like I didn't really learn a lot in class, because the way I learn things is more hands-on, and I have to actually visually see it and be in the situation. During class, I felt like I had to do a lot of the research on my own. I didn't feel like we didn't have the greatest instructors, I'll just say that. But when I started clinicals, I was so lucky to be in a clinical site where my preceptors were amazing. I ended up working at that clinical site, and I'm still friends with pretty much everyone I met during my clinicals. So when I say clinicals is super important, it's one, not only are you going to learn the basic idea of how to be an RT, but two, the number one thing I would say is that you have to think of your clinicals as a really long job interview, okay? Most of these hospitals that have these RT students, it's because they're trying to they're staffing and have these students apply for jobs after they graduate. One of my preceptors told me that you just have to think of this as a job interview. I took that with me with every location that I went to for clinicals, and it just made a huge difference in how I went into clinicals and my mindset. And once I realized, hey, this is where you're gonna learn all the crap you need to know about how to be an RT. I mean, don't take that time for granted, because this is really the only time that you're gonna be able to be doing some of these things and having someone right there to help you, guide you, and ask questions. And when you go into clinicals, you cannot be lazy. You cannot act like you don't want to be there. Like, I've met so many other students that would just hate going to clinicals and act like it. And I'm like, you really think these people are going to want to teach you when you have an attitude like that? And I think you just have to remember also that these preceptors that are helping you during your clinicals, some of them aren't getting paid to be your preceptor. They're not getting paid to have a student. Some people are. I mean, that also makes a difference. But I mean, most people, 9 times out of 10, most RTs that take on a student, they do want to teach you. You just have to ask questions and seem interested and seem eager. Like, I was always someone, well, I hope I was. I was always someone that went to clinicals, and I went to the codes, I went to the rapids, I asked questions, I brought my homework, I brought my books. Like, whenever we weren't doing anything in the department, I was reading, I was doing my homework, and then I was even asking them questions regarding what we were talking about. And 9 times out of 10, they were able to answer it and explain it 10 times better than my instructor. And like, I was really lucky to have great preceptors that walked me through doing ABGs, walked me through mechanical ventilation, BiPAP. I mean, I actually even put a BiPAP on while I was in the RT program. If I can find the picture, I'll put it up here. But I mean, these preceptors wanted me as their student whenever we would go in, because they knew I would help, I was eager, I wanted to do the work, and I didn't look like someone that was just there just to be there. With that being said, don't show up late to your clinicals. Come prepared, have your stethoscope, have your pulse ox. Like, set yourself up for success when you're going into these clinicals, because you don't know if you're gonna need a job from these people one day. And then these are your peers. These are going to be the people that you're gonna be working with and starting your career. So you have to have that mindset when you're going into clinicals in order to get the best experience out of it. I feel like students that say they had a horrible time during clinicals, a lot of it is your attitude. I feel like in life, it's like you get what you put into it, and I made sure to put my best foot forward when I was in clinicals, and every hospital site that I was at as a student offered me a job when I graduated. So, and that's not tooting my own horn, but I mean, and once you stand out and they notice you, they'll already be offering you a job before you're even done with clinicals, because that happened at every clinical site I went to during my program. So definitely keep that in mind. How long did it take for me to find a job after I graduated? It was pretty instant. Like, these hospitals were waiting for me to get my license in order for me to start. So even before I had passed my boards, I already had pretty much like 2 jobs lined up. So right after I finally got my license from the Texas Medical Board, I had a full-time job and I had a PRN job, and both of those jobs were hospitals I was a student at during clinicals. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty easy gig if you can transition into that right after school, because it's not like you're going into a hospital blind. Like, you know where things are, you know the people, and it just makes such an easy transition from being a student to an actual RT. And you have the support there because the other therapists know that you just graduated, and they're more open to helping you learn and grow as a therapist. And I feel like as a respiratory therapist, there are so many people that can complain about the job, and like any job, and being an RT. And I feel like as an RT, you really do just get out of it what you put into it. I mean, you can easily be a therapist that is a neb jockey that just works the floors, gives the nebs, does the treatments, and then that's it. And actually, one of my preceptors told me this when I was in school. And if that's what you want to do and you're happy with that, great. But if you really want to be a therapist that works in the ICU, works in the ER, helps the doctors, helps the nurses, helps them understand, helps make their job easier, I mean, it just makes your job so much more worthwhile. The experience of being an RT a lot better, and I feel like I was so lucky to get into this field around the time that I did, because I did graduate from the RT program in 2018. So by the time COVID hit, I had already hit like I was basically an RT for 2 years by that time, that I was able to become a traveler. And when COVID hit, it was just changed the game for RTs. You know what I mean? Like, we were in high demand, and I don't say that past tense because we are in high demand. And as a traveler, I've been given so many opportunities that RTs weren't given before, and I feel so blessed and lucky to be taking advantage of that. And I mean, it's changing people's lives, to be honest. Like, you're meeting all these RTs out there during these COVID crisis deployments, and the money is out there, and if you're willing to do the work and travel, and it's out there, and it can definitely change your life. Somebody asked how many people were in my class and how many people graduated. So because it's an accelerated program, our classes were really small. My RT program, we only had about 8 people in our class, and all 8 people graduated, but I'll tell you, only about 5 people passed their boards. And I don't really keep in touch with some of the people that I went to school with, but not everyone passed their boards right away. And because we don't keep in touch, I don't know if they ever even did pass their boards. But right out of school, I would say there was 4 of us out of the 8 that passed our boards right away. So yeah. Was RT school worth it? Somebody asked that too. In my experience, 100% yes, because like I said before, I just got really lucky that I graduated at such a perfect time that COVID hit and all these spikes in our field just popped up where we were just so needed, and I was able to travel. Everyone's experience is going to be different. But I can't emphasize, like, it's just what you put into it and your perspective. Like, I always knew being an RT, I didn't want to do this forever. Like, I didn't want to do bedside. And so even before I started the RT program, I researched what are your options outside of respiratory school, and always had my goals set to be out of bedside at a certain amount of time. So with COVID now, that kind of changes everything for everyone. And I don't know. I don't really know how long it will take me to get out of bedside, or if I even want to, because the money is really good for RTs right now, and I love traveling. I love being a travel RT. I like the experience. I like the job. And it's just a good fit for me right now. Yeah, so for me, it is a resounding yes. I think you see that throughout my videos that I'm just having a really good time being a travel RT. I love the job, the experience, the freedom it gives me, the financial freedom it gives me. So yes, for me, it is 100% yes, it was worth it. Yeah, let me just make sure I've answered most of the questions regarding the RT school stuff. Oh, somebody asked what was the hardest thing about being in RT school, and it was definitely just the sacrifice it took for me, because I didn't see my friends a lot. I just studied all the time, and I was very vocal about it though to my family and friends. They knew I was in the program, and I was like, let me just get through this next year, and then we can like wilding out like when I'm done with the program. So I was like, I didn't do much besides school and study and clinicals. And when you're doing clinicals, I don't know how some programs are, but ours, it was 12 hours and it was like 4 days a week we were in clinicals. So we were in clinicals from like 7 a to 7 p and then 1 day in class. So you're spending 4 days in the hospital, 12 hours. It was exhausting. The hardest part was just like the sacrifice of like socializing with my friends. But I mean, with anything that's worth doing, you do have to sacrifice something. So it was worth it, you know? And it's only a year or 2 years, like you can get through it, like it'll be okay. Okay, so I think that answers all my questions about RT school. So now I'm gonna get into being a traveler. So for those of you that haven't seen my videos before, I've been in RT for about 2 years, and I started traveling last year, June of 2020, right about when the pandemic hit. And all of last year I did a ton of COVID crisis deployments. I'll put a link to a video I made regarding the COVID crisis deployments here. I think it's a really good video to watch because I have noticed that they are 100% coming back. And when I say COVID crisis deployments, if you're an RT, you probably know what I'm talking about. These are assignments that are very high paying, but you are being sent to random areas. For me, I was sent to so many different places in South Texas, and then I even did a COVID crisis deployment in California. You're getting paid a lot, but you're definitely working a lot. Last year I did it, we would work 6 days in a row, 12-hour shifts, have 1 day off, and do it all over again. But that's how I started my travel career. And then I did a 2-month contract in Santa Barbara, California, which was more of a regular travel assignment where it was just an 8-week contract. I didn't necessarily work in the COVID units every day. And yeah, then after that, I went back to COVID crisis deployments for the rest of the year. So that's been my experience as a travel RT. Okay, so a few questions about that. Someone asked, do you need a license for each state and how? So I'm going to say that, so with COVID, a lot of states are taking temporary licenses, or they're taking emergent licenses, where if you have an RT license in any state, they will take you because they're in desperate need of RTs. Last year, that was pretty much every single assignment. Like, I never got a state license. Like, I worked in California, I never had a California license. I am from Texas, so I was luckily already had a Texas RT license. When you're looking for assignments during COVID, a lot of the times they just require an emergency license, and your agency takes care of that, so you don't even have to worry about it. So then we had that downhill of COVID where the last few months there weren't any COVID crisis packages, but RTs are still needed everywhere. So don't just think that, I know I emphasize a lot that, you know, I was like a COVID crisis deployments and all that, but that's just because that's been my experience this last year. But even after COVID, RTs are still needed all over. The assignment I'm currently in Iowa, it wasn't a COVID crisis package, it was just a regular assignment. And I have noticed it started maybe in January that they started saying, okay, each state is now requiring you to have that state license, which is how it's been for forever ago. It's just that COVID changed a lot of that. So yes, each state does typically require you to have a license in that state. And obtaining that can go a number of ways. For me, when the numbers for COVID were going down and I was starting to realize, okay, each state is requiring you to have a license if you want to work there, I went ahead and told my recruiter which states I wanted to work at. They were able to help me get the information to obtain that state license. So it depends which agency you're working with, or if you're working with an agency, they usually help you take care of the paperwork, and they even pay for it. But for me, it was just easier for me to pick the states that I knew I wanted to work in. So I knew I wanted to work in California, Florida, Hawaii. So I went ahead and just Googled the RCP license online and took care of the paperwork and paid the fees, did the fingerprints, did all that. And then usually if you get a job in those states and you tell the agency, oh, I obtained that license on my own, they usually reimburse you for that. So it's all about communication when you're doing these travel jobs. One of the #1 pieces of advice I would say as a travel therapist is you have to be your own agent. You have to advocate for yourself. So saying that, it's like, yeah, you have recruiters that are helping you find these jobs and giving you these pay packages and doing all the work for you, but you have to be the one to tell them, hey, I paid for this or that, will you include that in my package? Reimburse me for this, reimburse me for that. I mean, you have to be the one on top of things and looking at the pay packages for all these hospitals being like, that pay package seems a little low compared to what that agency is offering. Would you be able to negotiate that? And everything's negotiable. I mean, you got to put it on the table. You got to talk about it because you'll never know unless you ask, right? But yeah, so each state does require you to have their a license, and I went ahead and signed up for those because I knew eventually I do want to work in those states. For me, I have a bucket list of different states that I want to work in as a travel RT, so I kind of had that in mind. And also just talking to other travel therapists, there's like Facebook groups that you can join, and they usually tell you which state licenses are easy to obtain. Like for example, Florida had to be the easiest RCP license to get. You literally just pay a fee, submit the paperwork, and then show proof that you passed in the NBRC, and then you get your license in like a week. Some states are a lot harder to get. If you've ever looked at the Illinois RCP licensing application, it is ridiculous. Like me and my girlfriend were laughing about it because we were like, I don't even understand this application. Like they were asking everything. I was like, are they asking for like a blood oath or something for me to start working there? It was crazy. But yeah, some licenses are harder to get than others, and they all require different things. Like I said, some require fingerprints, some just require your NBRC verification. It's different. You just have to do that research for yourself or try to talk to your recruiter or agency to give you more information regarding those states. And don't think that you can only have an RCP license in one state. Because I'm licensed in actually California, Florida, and Hawaii, and Texas. So I have 4 RCP licenses in those states. It doesn't cancel out any of the licenses you have in the different states. It's different, but you just have to keep up with it yourself in renewing it, just paying that fee. For me, I just set an alarm and reminder on my calendar whenever those are going to expire, so I know to keep up with it, and I can be able to get reimbursements from whatever agency I'm working at. Okay, so somebody asked how to negotiate pay for travel contracts. So I think I touched base on that earlier when I was saying you really do have to be your own agent as a travel RT. The number one thing I can say as a travel RT is you have to do your research. You gotta know what the pay packages are looking like in the field for that particular state, for other states, especially during COVID. I mean, jobs are endless. Like there are jobs everywhere, pay packages going from that to that. You really just have to do your research, and you have to be able to communicate that to the agencies and the recruiters you're talking to. So for example, and I usually just negotiate pay on travel contracts when I know that other agencies are paying more money for that exact contract or just in the area. You can always show your recruiter, hey, look at this agency, they're paying this much for this job. Can you guys negotiate something close to that or in between that? You just really have to do your research as a travel RT. Someone asked also, how do you find agencies to work for? And it's all through research and also speaking to other travelers. You're gonna learn so much from having friendships and relationships with other travelers, because we share all our experiences together, our tips and tricks to each other. So once you are able, you kind of just get a feel of like, hey, this is the kind of agency I want to work for. And the recruiters, the type of recruiters they have, it can definitely make or break your experience with that agency. And you can learn a lot about an agency through their social media page and just talking to the recruiters. So every agency I've worked at so far has been fine. They're all kind of the same. It's just the pay package that they can offer you. I've never really ran into huge problems with a particular agency. If I did have a concern, I spoke about it to my recruiter and it was usually fixed or addressed. Okay, so someone asked, what are the differences between traveling and being a full-time employee? The biggest difference is that as a traveler, you are 100% expected to know what you're doing, and they expect you to come into the hospital with little to no guidance as far as being an RT. So this goes with me saying that as a new grad RT, I do not recommend trying to be a traveler. And honestly, at this point, most agencies require you to have at least a year or two experience as an RT, like in the ICU and ER. Like, they expect you to have experience before you become a traveler. And I 100% agree with that. As a traveler, because you're getting hired on to work for this hospital, they're expecting you that they don't have to train you for like a month or 2 months to start working independently. Usually at most of these assignments, you're given a day or two orientation and you're on your own. For example, the hospital I'm in at Iowa, I am the only night shift RT. I cover the ER, the ICU, the floors, anything that pops off in the hospital, I have to address as an RT by myself. So I would say as a new grad RT, that's like a hard job to take on right after school. I mean, yeah, right after getting out of school, because honestly, if you told me as a new grad that I would be in 3 years working in a hospital in Iowa as the only night shift RT, I would have been like that wouldn't make any sense to me, because I'm gonna be like, I could barely do an ABG in the ER. You're not telling me I'm gonna be the only therapist there. But with time and experience, it changes and you're just more comfortable doing what you're doing, you know? But with that, it's like they expect you to be able to work and be on staff independently quick. Like, the turnaround is quick. The biggest difference is, yeah, you're definitely not coddled as a traveler. You're very much expected to catch on to things quick, be able to do the skills as an RT. Like, they already think that you know how to do this to event, do that to that. They might guide you a little bit on how to use their system, but there's not a lot of teaching and holding your hand as a traveler. And so that's why I 100% agree that you should definitely get some experience before you do become a travel RT. It's not the greatest thing to do right out of school. Okay, somebody asked me, how long am I planning to stay in travel RT? And how long am I planning to work night shift? Okay, the night shift thing. I worked night shift right out of school. My first job, I worked night shift and I hated it. I cannot tell you how much I hated working night shift. I used to live with my sister during that time, and she was like, your attitude changed so much when you worked night shift. I was a zombie. I felt like there was a cloud over my head and I just couldn't think straight and nothing made sense, and I was sleepy all the time. I was tired all the time. And looking back on it now, I'm realizing that it was just kind of the perfect storm of exhaustion, because I'd never worked a night shift job before, and I was just I had such a high level of anxiety because I was a new grad and grasping like how to be an RT, that it just made me completely exhausted. So back then I would have said I hated night shift. But during these COVID crisis deployments, when you do start working, you do not have the option of day shift or night shift. You'll get to the hospital and they'll say, all right, you are working days, you are working nights. So it just so happened that during pretty much all of last year, I worked night shift, and I am working night shift right now in Iowa, and it's really not that bad. I'm getting used to the inconsistent sleep cycles, and to be honest, and every RT knows this, I was really lucky at my full-time job in Dallas that I was a day shift RT, and I was able to learn so much as a day shift RT. I mean, I feel like because the physicians are there during the day, there are typically more things you have to do during the day. There's a lot more transports, you do bronchs, you go to IR, you do different things that the night shift therapist doesn't typically do. And I was able to gain that experience as a day shift RT there. You do rounds with the doctors, you know, we don't do that during night shift. So I'm so glad that I was able to take that experience, and I have that experience and take it with me as an RT. But night shift, it is a little bit more chill because you're not doing extra things like that. But night shift RTs, they kind of do get the short end of the stick too, because most of the time night shift is usually always understaffed. There's not enough people on night shift. It's not, it's pretty common when you're night shift that you have a heavier load and you're getting a report from multiple people, because there just aren't that many people on night shift versus day shift. So that's one of the things that sucks as a night shifter. I really am one of those people that doesn't care if they work days or nights. So But how long do I see myself staying as an RT? Honestly, COVID's changed everything for me, and I definitely want to stay in the field for as long as I desire to be a travel RT. I'll say that. I do have like this bucket list of places that I want to travel as a RT and work, and I would like to mark off all the states on that list. And because of COVID, it kind of threw a wrench in my plan, because most of the COVID crisis deployments are either like in Florida, Texas, or California. So like majority of last year I worked in Texas or California. So I haven't been able to like explore other places that I would want to. So I would like to mark off most of the states on my bucket list, and then also financially I have a goal for myself. So once I kind of reach that, we'll see what happens. But I do see myself as an RT for maybe, I'll say the next few years, but nothing ever goes as I planned, so who knows what's gonna happen. But I mean, I'm happy where I'm at. I'm happy with the opportunities being an RT is bringing me, and I really cannot complain. So for those of you that are in school and, you know, just now coming into the field, just know it is a lucrative field right now. There's a lot of opportunities. So yeah, just be ready to work once you get out of school. So somebody asked me, is it hard or scary to be traveling alone? So if you've seen my previous vlogs, I did travel majority of last year alone. I did those COVID crisis deployments. I went to Santa Barbara. And then there was a little bit of time where I did have someone traveling with me for a few months. And then I am currently in my 13-week assignment in Iowa. Well, I just finished it, where I did travel alone again. And I would be lying if I said when I started traveling alone again that I wasn't scared or nervous about it. But I think majority of that was just things that was going on in my personal life. But I can say that it's really not that bad. I think that being independent and strong and just have that feeling of like, I did that. Like, I didn't rely on nobody. I did it by myself. I have a lot of friends that are just like, I could never do that. I could never drive 12 hours by myself or live in a hotel by myself or do this and that. I'm just like, it's really not bad. I mean, if you're not comfortable being alone or, you know, enjoying the time on your own, I just think that's something you really do need to learn to do. Of course, you think about like, you know, I'm a female traveling, driving by myself. Yeah, and you know, there is a reason to be concerned, but I think as long as you're traveling smart, you're always aware of your surroundings, you're always alert. I mean, I'm not walking down the street at like 4 in the morning, you know. I have things that protect me when I am out. I'm always pretty aware of my surroundings, and I'm always letting my family, my sister especially, she has a tracker thingy on my phone where she always knows my location. And I usually always tell someone where I'm going, what I'm doing. But I mean, traveling alone is not that bad. It's not that scary. You'll never know what you can do until you do it. And majority of the time when you look back on it, it's not as scary as you thought it was. Going into Iowa and traveling by myself again was definitely one of the hardest things I've had to do in the last few years, just with everything going on in my life. But now that the 13 weeks are gone, I can say that I feel confident again. I feel strong. I feel like I don't feel like the person that I was 13 weeks ago when I first started Iowa. And I just needed that again. I needed to feel that independence again to travel alone. But it's definitely not scary being a solo traveler. I see myself even just taking vacations by myself. I've always loved doing things like that. So for me, it's not such a foreign concept. Just make sure when you are traveling solo and doing these assignments by yourself, always be aware of your surroundings, always let people know where you are. I mean, you can't just go into this blindly, you know what I mean? I think of it like, I'm so happy traveling solo and having this experience for myself, by myself, and I'm content with it, that once I do, like, who knows, I might get married or meet someone. when we start traveling together, just imagine how much sweeter that is, you know, like. But yeah, I mean, traveling solo is honestly one of the best things you could do for yourself, and I'm 100% all about that and all about that lifestyle. So I hope that answers your question. I feel like I answered a lot of questions, and I hope this was a helpful video, especially you guys that are going into the RT program. You know, first of all, congratulations to you guys. Best of luck to you guys throughout the school year. Just know if you're going through a stressful time and it sucks, that this is all momentary. Like, when you're going through hard times, just remember, this is not your whole life. This is just a tiny little part of your life that you're going through, and the other side of it is going to be so great when you're done with school. Trust me. I just remember being an RT student and thinking about, I'm gonna be a traveler, I'm gonna go here and there, and now I'm doing it. So yeah. Okay, so anyways, if there's something I didn't cover, if you want to leave a comment down below, please leave a comment and I'll definitely try to answer it for you. I have a lot of exciting things coming up on my channel, new assignments. We'll see what is going to happen next. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it for you guys. Be sure to subscribe so you see all my other videos in the future, and like this video if you enjoyed it. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.